All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here, talking real music in real time for real people just like you and me. The rock and roll world is mourning original R.E.O bass player Gregg Philbin, who has passed away. Um, I've read a bunch of articles. I don't know how old Greg was, and I don't know what Greg passed away from. Just put that out there. And it's kind of weird because R.E.O Speedwagon is putting out certain things about Gregg Philbin. He was the bass player who was there at the very beginning. So you could say he was a founding member of the band. I believe Greg played on the original version of Riding the Storm Out with Mike Murphy on vocals. And even the vocal, I think, that Kevin Cronin did, Greg was there for that as well. The R.E.O people are mourning his death by apologizing for his work, saying, he was a little bit too progressive. He was a little bit too much like John Entwistle. And we really needed a rhythm section. We needed to lock down the bass and the drums. And Greg just didn't fit in with that. Okay. Way to mourn, guys. Look, I get it. They wanted Bruce Hall in the band. Bruce was maybe a better bass player. I don't know if he was a better bass player. He was a different kind of bass player. Certainly in the early days, I think R.E.O was a bit more of a jam-oriented band. Later on, they would become almost like a pop band, especially in the 1980s. And a lot of the early fans, the old school fans, they really lamented the loss of people like Gary Richrath when he left the band. And original drummer Alan Gratzer, he would leave. But in the case of Gregg Philbin, he was replaced prior to the band's breakout album, which was You Can Tune a Piano, But You Can't Tune a Fish. Although Philbin played on the double live album, You Get What You Play For, which came out prior to that, and is a monster live album. If you go back and listen to it, you've got a good set of headphones or good stereo system. I was getting into all of that old R.E.O stuff when I first purchased High Infidelity, and I wanted to know the history of this band. And certainly, if you are an FM radio person back in the 70s, you were hearing plenty of R.E.O Speedwagon on your favorite album rock radio station. But it is kind of weird to say, hey, Gregg Philbin, he was a really savvy guy. He was really important in the evolution of R.E.O Speedwagon. You can't underestimate how good he was. And so we got rid of him. That's kind of what happened. And look, bands make changes. And maybe this is a little awkward because Greg passes away. And maybe they just, didn't want to say positive stuff. They wanted to basically say, well, this is the reason why Greg had to leave the band. But I don't know if that's a good way of dealing with this. I think a more appropriate tribute would be, hey, Gregg Philbin, original bassist, a band that was hitting on all cylinders back in the early days and maybe wasn't getting the amount of commercial success that they deserved, but they certainly appealed to a really smart and savvy audience. And much like those early Journey albums, which aren't pop, they're fusion and rock, and R.E.O was this boogie band, this jam band that I'm sure hit all of the pubs, hit all of the fraternity parties in the early days. The only guy who's left in the group from those days is keyboard player Neil Doughty. I mean, everybody else has either passed away, including Gary Richrath and now Gregg Philbin, or, just quit like Alan Gratzer. So it's interesting. I don't know about Mike Murphy and the rest of those singers, if they're still around or not, but everybody was really important to that sound. And Gregg Philbin was a really good bass player. Go back and listen to his work. You may not be into that style, and I think that was the issue. Obviously, they wanted more commercial success, and that's why they got Cronin. That's why they got Bruce Hall. And they became R.E.O Speedwagon, the band that became a very successful multi-million selling band during the 1980s. And they probably couldn't have done that if they retained that 70s lineup. But the guy I miss most from R.E.O. Speedwagon is Gary Richrath, who just a guitar hero, super underrated, super underappreciated. And his departure from R.E.O. really changed the dynamic of that band moving forward. And it's too bad that he didn't stay and Kevin Cronin didn't try to work with him, because he was just an amazing player. And that tension that was there between Gary and Kevin, that's what really helped with R.E.O.'s success, even in the late 70s, but especially on High Infidelity, where, again, Kevin Cronin, this folky pop writer, and this guitar slinger, and they're dueling it out, trying to figure out what kind of music they were going to make. And I think Gregg Philbin was probably one of those characters too, to some degree, wanting to do things on bass that they were saying, no, don't do that, you know? And so anyway, Gregg Philbin, definitely a pioneer in the classic rock world, and certainly will be missed. But you can go back and listen to like R.E.O. 2 and just crank it up tonight and remember how great Gregg Philbin was. All right, that's my video, folks. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, Patreon for $1 a month. A little bit stagnant right now on new subs, so if you're not subscribing, please do. I need your help, and I appreciate it, and I will see you soon.